Hey, muscular gentlemen, welcome. This episode is fascinating. I can't tell you how fun it was to interview this gentleman. His name is Nathanial Bork. I call him Nate. And I actually have been friends with him since fourth grade. Okay, so long story short, we were friends way back then. We were neighborhood friends. So he lived down the street from me. Went to the same elementary school, all that stuff. And then we lost contact, being so young, we didn't have social media and all the different things. Our families kind of, one of us moved, something happened, and we didn't stay connected. However, one of my VAs, my virtual assistants on my Facebook page actually friended him. I don't know if it was through mutual friends or what, but somehow I ended up friending him. He messages me back. It's like, holy cow, I can't believe that you're here. Like, I never thought I'd talk to you again. And so we started messaging back and forth, catching up, talking, and oh my word, what a fascinating life Nate has lived. And he brought so much cool information to the table when we started discussing about masculinity and things like that. I'm like, man, I have to have you on my show. So Nate was a teacher, a college professor for 7 years. He has a master's degree in philosophy, and then he actually went back to school and just finished up a PhD in political science. So the topics that we got to go through, oh my word, it was amazing. I can't wait for you to jump into this episode. We talked about the woke, we talked about the left, the far left, the right. We talked about masculinity. We talked about feminism. We talked about so many different topics, but his take on this and the history of these different political groups, the history of kind of, I wouldn't even say the history, but where we've taken masculinity and where we're, the new definitions that keep popping up with like toxic masculinity, things like that. Really well explained and absolutely fascinating. So let's jump in. I can't tell you how exciting it was to have him on the show. I'm really glad we've reconnected, and I'm certainly going to try to get him back on. So jump into this episode. I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the Muscular Gentleman. Where we don't apologize for being men. Masculinity, sex, fitness, and attraction, helping men reclaim their masculine edge, improve their sex life, get the body they've always wanted, and master their mindset to build a life worth living. This is the Muscular Gentleman, and now your host, Rustin Webb.
Welcome, gentlemen. I'm excited to introduce Nate Bork. This is actually a friend of mine from when we were kids. We lived in the same neighborhood growing up in Monument, Colorado. So I've known him for a really, really long time, but we've been able to reconnect through social media, which is insane because I don't think we thought we'd talk to each other again, not on purpose, but just life, right? And moving in all sorts of different directions. But I want to say we knew each other, until maybe middle school?
Yeah, fourth or fifth grade.
Fourth, fifth grade is when we first started hanging out. So yeah, been quite a while, but we've been able to reconnect. Yeah. I got to start chatting with Nate and come to find out he is a PhD in political science, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So some of the topics we've already discussed, just catching up in life, has been so phenomenal that I was like, I have to have him on the Muscular Gentleman. So welcome, Nate. I'm super excited to have you on the show, man. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, besides the fact that you have become a doctor in political science?
Okay. So yeah, kind of had this wild childhood. Went through a period like 17 to 23 where those are my punk rock years. Very destructive, very didn't plan on living much longer. So I just like threw it all to the wind. Got into philosophy. Philosophy kind of saved my life, let me rebuild everything. Went to pay it forward, got the master's in philosophy, taught for 7 years, got in this really crazy situation with my college where in the name of equity, inclusion, and diversity, EID, they wanted me to lower my standards to basically an 8th grade level. And so everybody would pass so they could retain more revenue. I protested. They fired me. I was the first adjunct who was a subject of Committee A investigation. The college got censured. And then I was invited up to do the PhD up at CSU. And in that time, right, from when I got fired in 2017 to now, the world has changed dramatically. and that affects directly like discussions of masculinity, health, and everything else.
Right. Which is why I'm excited to have you on the show. So you
Yeah.
taught for college. You taught college,
Yeah.
and they literally wanted you to lower the standards of your curriculum.
Yeah. So there were 6 classes identified as gatekeeper classes where they were really difficult. I taught at the level that I was taught in, I thought, like a normal college class. And they said that's way too much. Instead of having 2 8-page papers, you're going to do a single 7-page paper or 2 3-page papers. And that's all the writing you're allowed to assign. I had to drop content by 20%. I had to get rid of like as many white males as possible. I had to do hand-over-hand writing with them every 3rd class for the entire class.
So
Yeah.
you had to get rid of white males.
Yeah.
How,
they wanted to.
How do you do that?
Well, in philosophy, it's almost impossible, right? Because what philosophy is it's a conversation amongst rich white males from 26 centuries ago who've been talking to each other up until the last 100 years. And in the last 100 years, more people show up, and the field expands.
Sure.
But to know like where we came from and what we're talking about, you've got to go read all the old Greeks and all the old Romans, and then the Germans after that.
Right. So yeah, I mean, obviously Aristotle and all these white men bringing out all these quotes that people continue to push on social media, right? How interesting. So did they ever explain why they wanted to push out men, like white males? And
so this became the subject of my dissertation. There's a force that Nancy Fraser calls progressive neoliberalism, which is where neoliberalism is where government institutions act like corporations and they maximize profits. But to do so, they adopt progressive policies and push them on people. And she's a progressive, so she's worried about that it corrupts the progressive cause. So basically what happened was they wanted to lower all these standards because they wanted to increase pass rates to keep the money flowing. And I thought they were exploiting people.
Right. So they're just using this for money. That is insane.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, okay, so you kind of went through this quickly, but I'm just kind of unpacking it because it was a lot. But so you decided to protest against lowering the standards for your course, correct?
Yep. And I protested the chair, then the dean, then the vice president and the president, and then the higher learning commission. And then the first day of class, like I walked into class, I saw the class, and I'm like, I knew what I was going to get in trouble for, but I had to tell them like what was going on. I said, I cannot teach this class the way I've traditionally taught it. This class is not going to be a college course the way I know it. This class is basically going to be unfailable. And I'm not going to be able to teach you guys the content correctly. And they put all these restrictions on me. And I showed them the plans that were handed to me by the administration. And then they complained to the administration. And then the next week I was fired. Well, and they paid me out so I couldn't sue.
They paid you out?
Yeah. Because otherwise I would have had legal recourse against them.
Look, I went to college, I went to grad school. I went to college because I wanted to learn. And I wanted to know everything about anything within the subjects that I was trying to, the courses I was taking. So it's funny that all of a sudden you get this restriction. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of these students. I would be pissed off too, especially
they were enraged. Well, and what had been happening was they've been already doing this in mathematics, and we had all these students, right? Because it's a community college, and they're going on to the 4 years, especially like School of Mines, and they had gotten to substandard in mathematical education, and they're going on to become engineers, and they can't do the work because you can't just like the gap was too big from like kids who had already been going to School of Mines.
Right.
So we're getting a lot of student feedback that we'd sort of let them down. We'd made it too easy for them.
That's insane. And so they had they had lowered standards for passing.
Yeah.
And it did it literally say like you can't fail anyone?
So what it said was 80% of all groups had to pass. 80% of white males, 80% of black females, 80% of Asian males, 80% of Hispanic females, 80% of all groups had to get a C or higher. And so what happened is you had 3, let's say, Hispanic men, and one dropped out of the class, right? Because like life happened. One had an A and the other was failing. You would have to bump him up to a C to not get in trouble. And that was happening.
That is wild, man. Okay. So you get pushed out of the community college essentially because you won't comply. Then
the other college actually supported me. Arapahoe Community College in Littleton supported me fully in my protest.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So how did they go about supporting you? What does that look like?
They let me I got no trouble whatsoever for protesting. I'd actually been protesting against adjunct pay for a long time. So 90% of teachers in community college are adjuncts, especially like CCA. Sometimes it's not that bad. But that means no benefits, no contracts, no guaranteed work. You find out like 3 days before the semester whether or not you have a job, and you make about $20,000 a year without benefits. So I was working with the system to try to improve working conditions already when this all happened.
Right.
I was the founder and president of the Adjunct Faculty Synod. I was the founder and president of a chapter of AAUP, American Association of University Professors. And I've been working with the system president and the college presidents to try and enact reforms. I was actually one of the few rebels who actually got along with the establishment, because I try to get along with everybody.
Sure. Did they get in trouble at all, the college, for what happened with you? Like a slap on the hand, anything? Not
directly, but it basically set off a small civil war in the college between people who agreed with me and people who disagreed with me. And they said that, the relationship between administration and faculty was like ice cold from there on out. Everyone was really angry with each other over this heavy-handed mandate.
Okay, so you left there. You ended up at CSU for your PhD.
Yep, and that's also where I got my master's in 2009.
Okay. So you talk about your dissertation. Can you talk a little bit more about that, because that was interesting?
Yeah. So I've got it actually right here. So I combined a number of things. So the first of all, I looked at, what does the research say? Why do conservatives not believe in global warming? And I kind of went to everything that they've done on that, because they're very skeptical of it, or they're very concerned that it's being used as a guise to just increase government and increase money and exploit people when it's not as big of a deal.
Okay,
you have like conspiratorial thinking.
Okay, before we dive into this, I because we've had these conversations and I know a little bit, I want the audience to understand. Can you explain a little bit how you have this like very middle ground, kind of almost Switzerland-like stance on the politics? Because obviously I don't want to dive crazy into politics, but this is part of Muscular Gentleman, right? Masculinity and understanding the environment that we're living in, the climate that we're dealing with. So yeah, stab into that just for a second.
Okay. So actually, so a lot of what we're seeing right now in terms of like critical race theory, critical gender theory, comes from the critical theory of the Frankfurt Institute. The leader of the second generation of the Frankfurt Institute was a gentleman named Jürgen Habermas. He's still alive. He's like really old now, but he's really alive. And he came up with this idea called social health and social pathology. And he bounces between different sorts of fields. And he has what's called a ideal speech situation. And that's everybody's allowed to say anything, and you make room for everyone to get engaged. And that became my model of like what health was, because that's what college was for me, right? Everybody could say what they thought. You could debate, you could discuss things. You couldn't get personal with each other. But like, that's what we have, and that's sort of what we've lost. And so that became my entire model. And then the sort of progressive neoliberalism is I looked at as a pathology or a disease that sort of infected everything. And it's not that progressivism is bad or that neoliberalism is bad. It's when you combine the two, it generates these really hostile forces that are really negative for everybody.
So your stance is like you can speak the language of kind of all these different political, I guess, languages.
Yeah,
is what you'd say. But then there's this progressive. So the combination is what again? Progressivism and
neoliberalism.
And so that combo just creates basically a front for you're either on this side or you're everyone's against you, or what?
Yeah. So basically, the establishment takes on progressive policy stances, and then through orthodoxy forces people to agree with them or face like really serious consequences. So cancel culture. I went to Heterodox Academy, and there's a young lady there who spent her entire college career getting people fired, and she got 6 professors fired. And she just like was like, it's my cause is to destroy as many lives as possible, to rid the university of these like unwoke thinkers. And then when she got to Heterodox, she's like, oh my God, like what have I done? Like she was in tears, because she just like realized like she just destroyed so many people's lives looking for the most minor transgression to hold against them.
Because they weren't agreeing with her philosophy or her.
Yeah.
Wow. That is so interesting. Okay. So, dive back in. I took you on a tangent there. Sorry. Dive back into what you were saying about your dissertation. So we're talking about why what right-wing conservatives are not kind of seeing the, I guess, or in agreement with global warming.
Yeah. So at CSU, all of our dissertations have to include an environmental element. And for mine, it was like, well, global warming, why do people on the right not believe in it or not think it's very severe?
Sure.
Because like they're not cooperating on anything anymore. And so part of what's going on is the same people who are saying global warming is real and you need to take it seriously are the same people who are saying whiteness is a disease, masculinity is toxic. People are, cis heteronormativity is evil and needs to be destroyed. The family is a artificial construct that needs to be brought down, right? So you're attacking people's social identities over and over and over and saying, oh, by the way, would you mind if we taxed you more to make the environment better? It's like, you can't insult people and then ask them to cooperate with you.
Right,
You can't
right.
threaten
I'm
people and
going
ask
to
them to
tear you
cooperate with
down, but I want you to agree with me on just this other random topic.
Yeah, and I'm threatening you. I'm going to threaten your livelihood. I'm going to threaten your family. I'm going to come after you with everything I've got. And it's like, there's a reason, like, it's really driving this. And so what the right has done in response is they've realized that they're in a game that you can't win. And so they're not going to play at all. They're just going to stubbornly make it as obnoxious as possible. And that's part of the reason Trump became president. The left took on this like characteristic of like a hall monitor, just like, don't say this, don't say that. That's a microaggression. That's a bad thing. Don't say this. And Trump's like the bad kid smoking in class, playing with a knife, scribbling his like initials on the wall. It's very appealing. That just like middle finger to like the establishment telling you what to say and do.
Sure. Completely non-political businessman comes in. Yeah, that's a funny analogy. But so it's interesting because you brought up masculinity being toxic from this this woke or progressive side. And obviously, like this show is all about helping men become more masculine. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the way, and I don't know how much you know, but like what real quick, there's so many topics we can talk about, Nate. This is insane. But you kind of discussed the population or the percentage of population that are considered this kind of woke, quote unquote, woke group. Can you tell us a little bit more about that group? Because I'm not saying I don't know. I've yet to really bump into these kind of people because of the people I surround myself with. But I'm curious about that.
Okay. So really quick, I was on Facebook earlier and I came across a Vox article saying that Black men need to reject patriarchy and cis heteronormative gender roles. So it was like right there, like first thing I woke up to this morning.
And so is this probably a woke person that is pushing this?
Vox is very woke.
Okay.
And so actually, I went to the Black Marxist conference in 2020 during the election. They were saying that the Trump had record Black male support. One, because the Black movement, Marxist movement, had been so focused on women and LGBTQIA plus persons, and they were telling like cis hetero men who are Black, go to the back of the bus. You're the last in line to get help, and they were resenting it. And they said Trump represented a form of white success, right? Money, girls, cars, fun, like extravagance, and that was very attractive. And so they're trying to work against money and girls being attractive to men, and they were trying to what was it on? That Black men should accept their status as lower than other people in the community. And I was like, you're going to drive these people directly into being Republicans, is what you're going to do. Right.
Yeah, we're really moving way far away from bipartisanship, aren't we?
Yep. So what I'm looking at here to circle back to your question.
Yeah.
Jim Pizaki for a second. So it's hiddentribes.us, hiddentribes.us. So 8% of the population is what they call progressive activists. 25% are traditional conservatives or devoted conservatives. That'd be your MAGAs and your TradCons. And then the rest, right? 26 plus 8 or 25 plus 8 is 33. 67%, 2/3 of American are what they call the exhausted majority, with the biggest group being politically disengaged, followed by moderates, passive liberals, and traditional liberals. And so really what's going on here is it's on the left, there's a conflict between like we call Rawlsian liberalism, right? Welfare state liberalism. We have capitalism, but you have a safety net. Versus the sort of Marxist element, or like these great-grandchildren theories from Marxism that are very much like, they don't like liberals at all. They think liberalism is something that needs to be brought down too, along with everything else. And what they created this game is agree with us and obey us, or we'll call you a racist and a sexist and we'll destroy your life. And the liberals are like, well, I'm not a racist or a sexist. Like, that's really bad. I'll just kind of stay quiet here and hope like the mob doesn't come for me.
So the mob, you said, is around 8%?
Yeah, it's not many.
Right.
But so this is
the woke group, but they created an 8% mob, but they seem to be, at least from a social media standpoint, it seems to be like there's more than that, right? Doesn't it? It seems like they're able to appear bigger than what they are.
So part of what's going, so on campus, it's really bad. It's like 80% plus of faculty are left of center, and 94% of administration is left of center. There's not a single field where conservatives are the majority. And it might be possible like Catholic studies or military science might have more conservatives, but we couldn't find any group where like they were represented.
Wow.
And so on social media, right, because you can see what your friends are doing, what's actually driving this is like it's a culture of fear. Like, let's say you and I are both very left-wing woke activists and we care a lot about these issues. If there's something going on, and if I see you arguing with somebody and I don't jump in and help you, you can sit and say like that my silence is supporting your enemies, that I'm supporting patriarchy and white supremacy because I didn't come to your aid when you're doing that. So it becomes a call to join in. And if you don't join in, it's possible that you're a threat to the group or you're not really doing this and you're causing problems. And that the mob could then turn on you very quickly. So you're incentivized to join in these attacks as quickly and strongly as possible.
Wow.
And the rights learned how to respond to this too, right? The rights not just passively taking it, they are acting like middle schoolers. Like, if we're going to play this game, we're going to make this game so unbearable. Like, if we're going to play a game that we can't win, we're going to become so unbearable that nobody wants to play this game.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there was the Donald subreddit actually got banned from Reddit, and they went and created their own thing called Patriots.win. And this kid became a hero over there. He was a 7th grader. And the teacher's like, wear your mask, get your vaccine, do as you're told, do as you're told, do as you're told. And the kid stared her directly in the eyes and just crapped himself right there. Just defiantly, just to like let you know, like just to say, I will absolutely not do this. And the kid was like hailed as a hero for a few days. What? The phrase is like become ungovernable. And I'm like, that's exactly where they're at. They're like, if you're going to tell me what to do and how to think, I'm going to make you regret it. I'm going to do everything I can to make you like regret even thinking that you can control me.
You said he was a 7th grader?
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane. I'm curious about the parents involved in that situation. I'm assuming he did not get in trouble for what he did.
No. I think the parents were totally okay with it.
Right. Okay, so let's dig in a little bit because the toxic masculinity, we hear it thrown around so much. And real quick, I just kind of want to give you a brief understanding of how I define it within the Muscular Gentleman online men's coaching program, but also just I'm writing a book called The Muscular Gentleman, and it's kind of a guide to masculinity in our current state, kind of a new era of what masculinity looks like. So what I've done is I created kind of a little line, like a spectrum, right? So just draw a line in your head right across a piece of paper. In the middle, I call it true masculinity. It's kind of the form of the characteristics that make up what a masculine man can have. So logic and reason being one of the top ones. Strength, that could be inner strength, mental strength, and physical strength. There's so many, right? There's I believe 50 that are going to be in my book, but just the ones off the top of my head. Assertiveness, being one of those, responsible or being responsible. So all these different characteristics play into this true masculinity, where if you take on these traits, you can really show up in your most masculine form. Now, if we slide from the middle of that line over to the left, I have weak masculinity as this for this diagram. And under weak masculinity, it's basically true masculinity, but taking an absent step backwards. So being super passive, or basically bowing out completely and being silent, right? It's kind of this weakness where you're not stepping up into these characteristics that you could. So you're completely backing out. Then on the other side of the scale, so if you go back to true masculinity, slide over to the right, it's toxic. And all you're doing is you're taking these main characteristics like, let's say, assertiveness. You're taking assertiveness and you're going into a toxic or poisonous measure, and you're turning into controlling or abusive, or right. So that's the toxic side. And I believe that to be more true as far as what, one, we need masculinity because of all these amazing characteristics we can provide as men, but two, they can become toxic. Men, some guys hate the word toxic, but under my definition, it makes sense because you could become controlling or dominant, or things that can cause problems outside of maybe a war or defending your family. They can become toxic. So that's kind of the definition, I guess, for me and the men that I work with, and how we kind of start to look at masculinity. I believe you're going to come up with a completely different definition from the woke side and their definitions of toxic masculinity.
So first of all, have you read Aristotle?
No.
So your model of masculinity is literally Aristotle's.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a generalized version of it. Yeah. So Aristotle thought that human beings are our telos, or our purpose, is to be happy. And the way you achieve happiness is you always aim for the virtuous mean. So, right, you don't want to spend too much money and go broke, but you don't want to spend like no money and never enjoy life.
Right.
You don't want to be like passive where you get walked over all the time, but you don't want to be like hyper aggressive, where you're going to prison for committing violent crimes.
Right.
So yeah, so everything's in this golden middle, and that's where you want to aim for.
Right. That's awesome.
So you've accidentally plagiarized Aristotle.
Hopefully I don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, he's 26 centuries late to see you.
Right. Well, hopefully I can make him proud,
Yeah.
So that's, and it's true, right? You want to find that virtuous middle where you show up in life, you participate in life. You're not just this sideline person watching, or you're trying to control everyone in your life, right? And like you said, end up in jail. So what's this understanding though, like of that? Why are they taking masculinity and wanting it to be so toxic, and this patriarchy wanting to be canceled essentially? What does that look like from their end? And also, why are they wanting this to be obsolete?
Okay, can I give the long version?
Yes, please.
It's not too long. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're good.
So actually, what's happening right now goes back to Hegel, philosopher in the 1830s in Germany. And Hegel had this theory of history, that history had this being called world spirit. And world spirit wanted to bring about freedom. And everything that happened in history was to try and realize how freedom could be possible. So every civilization is a step along the way. Every war, every historical event is part of this idealistic sort of reality, that basically reality is the spirit coming into being of freedom. The right Hegelians say, we've done it. We're here in Germany. It's 1850, 1860. We've achieved freedom. We have no slaves. Men and women have the right to vote. We're the first free people on earth. Hooray for us. And the left Hegelians say, no, there's still Christianity. There's still capitalism. And that's where Marx comes out of. And Marx is like, we're not actually free. We're actually in this very cleverly imposed prison, because people are still working, like 70 hours in a coal mine. It's really dirty. People are being exploited. The rich get to sit at the top of the food chain, just enjoying life, and everybody else is just being ground into dust. And so what happens is history goes on. In the World War II and leading up to that, some Jewish Marxist intellectuals flee Germany because it's a good idea. And they start the Frankfurt School. And they said, actually, so capitalism and liberalism and the Enlightenment and all the foundations of Western civilization are actually this very cleverly designed prison. You're not actually free. You think you're more free than someone in North Korea, but you're not. You're just in a more clever cage. And then they basically design how does that work? How do you get trapped by consumerism? How do things become commodities? How do people become alienated from their lives through their work? And then that goes after critical race theory, critical gender theory, queer theory, structuralism, post-structuralism, and then fatness studies and disability studies. And then what happens is, so the critical theory is in the 1940s and 50s. The second generation is kind of going on in the 60s and 70s. In the 60s, you get the New Left under Herbert Marcuse, who wrote a book called One-Dimensional Man. And in there he says, you're not going to get the revolution by having poor whites turn against rich whites. We're going to have to do this by social division. We're going to turn minorities against whites, women against men, queer people against straight people. And this is how we can bring down this the Enlightenment and this capitalism and liberalism. And from that point on, and then from the 60s and 70s to 80s and 90s, they take over the colleges. They take over the education schools. Christina Hoff Sommers in Who Stole Feminism writes about this extensively. It's a fantastic book if you haven't read it. And she said basically Who Stole Feminism by Christina Hoff Sommers.
Okay.
And she said in the 80s and 90s, they were very deliberate. They wanted the education schools so they could train all the future teachers and all the future teachers basically how to turn children into activists and sort of use it this way. And now the millennials and Generation Z have been raised in this system. And now it's popping up everywhere. And now you're seeing this really violent backlash. Homeschooling, private schooling, religious schooling. Carson v. Malkin was a Supreme Court case where they said you can use funds for religious schools. The number of people in homeschool has doubled. The biggest driver of that is the Black population. Where they're what are you teaching my kids? Oh, hell no. I'm not putting up with this.
Right.
And it's really split this culture into two different ways, right? The liberals should be with the conservatives and defending the Enlightenment and the idea that you're an individual first, but they've sort of been cowed into submission by the sort of Marxist left whose goal is to bring down the whole house of cards.
So
what they call liberation.
So they're wanting to take this down for you said a lot of stuff, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
But what are they trying? So they're trying to take it down for what purpose exactly? Just
So
because
the idea is, right, that these ideological bars of this cage that we're all in, right, in the Enlightenment, right? We think a lot of us believe in Christianity or religion, or I think with faith, we have families.
Sure.
We think we should work hard. We think men should become masculine and develop themselves. We think women should be feminine and have children and be mothers and wives. And really, all these are like bars of the invisible cage. And so the idea is that if they want us to liberate us from this cage, all of this has to come down. Logic, reason, traditional family roles, the nuclear family, it all has to go. And then naturally, our benevolent nature, which has been oppressed and warped by the system, will express itself, and we'll all live in harmony.
And what does that look like on their end? What's this natural like mechanism they're expecting to take place?
Well, so this winds up being interesting. So Marx said it's going to happen inevitably. Marx was not saying do it. Marx was saying this is going to happen because the poor are in such bad condition, they're going to just eventually like have nothing left to lose but their chains, and they'll revolt. But then Lenin, right, who in the Soviet Union said, no, we need a vanguard of the revolution. We need to go in there and we need to force this to happen. And then we need a communist, like totalitarian state superstructure to usher in this era of communism, where basically we go back to what life was like when we were tribal living. There's no work. There's everyone cooperating. We're all just sort of getting along and looking out for each other. What is it? From each according to their abilities to each according to their needs. I messed that up. But that's sort of the communist idea. But we're all going to take care of each other. And the reason we're not just taking care of each other and being benevolent is because capitalism and individualism have warped us too far.
Interesting. That is wild. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of their goal, correct? Now, what are they're obviously trying to take down masculinity because so essentially what you're saying is they're trying to take out masculinity because that is part of the cage, or one of the bars of the cage that is something that we created. Yeah.
So they want to liberate you from being masculine, because patriarchy and the traditional gender roles don't just hurt women and minorities, they also hurt men and white people. And so even though it looks like you're benefiting from it, it's actually imprisoning you, right? You have to go work out. You have to not eat chocolate cake all day. You have to, you have to do all these things that you might not actually want to do. And then it's not really fair, right? So it's like, if you embrace masculine this way, but say somebody else doesn't want to work out or doesn't want to take care of themselves or doesn't want to develop these traits, or let's say they're just naturally very feminine or very non-gender conforming, it's sort of a form of oppression that you have this model, like, here's what a man is, and they're not fitting up to it. And therefore, like that, that's a form of oppression against them.
Instead of me just having my own personal opinion on what I think masculinity, and it looks like it's more just like, well, no, because you think that way, you're oppressing me.
So it's actually what's going on is you have what's called false consciousness. This comes out of Marxism too. You have been conditioned and trained by the cage to think that that's what masculinity should be. You have been tricked. You have been deceived by the illusion.
That is so wild. And so, and basically it sounds like the way you're describing that, you could say that about just about anything that they don't agree with, that it's just this illusion.
Oh yeah. Everything is part of false consciousness created by capitalism, and the idea that you're free, the idea that you're an individual, the idea that you should be a good, that there's a certain type of man who's a good husband and a good father. All of these things are part of this illusion created by the system to keep you enslaved.
Wow. Okay. And they're just ignore kind of all the upside and benefits and the positive things coming out of that kind of structure or life.
Right. You've also been conditioned to think that those benefits are good things.
Right.
Because of your false consciousness.
Like raising my boys to be good citizens and contribute to the world and become better men and fathers and husbands. That's me in a false delusion.
Yeah. And you said contributing to my society. They don't like this society. They think the society is oppressive and destructive and needs to be brought down. So by your contributing to it, you're actually making things worse for everybody who hurts the system. So you're making things worse for minorities. You're making things worse for women. You're making things worse for gay people and trans people.
It sounds like anarchy is like they just want
anarchy. So anarchy is very popular in this world. The idea there's just going to be no structure whatsoever. But then, of course, how do you govern that? And there are people who take this very seriously, who are very pro this idea of what an anarchy could actually look like. Okay. The problem with anarchy is if your neighbor isn't an anarchy and your neighbor declares war on you, your neighbor's going to win. And this is sort of what I brought up. I'm like, it's not just like, there's not just the Western liberal civilization, right? Us in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, and I guess Japan, India, and a few other places that are very like westernized. There's also the CCP in China. They want world domination. They are not going to play nice. And if we are too soft, they're going to take advantage of that. The Islamic world is looking to take advantage of that. These are civilizations that are very much like out to win it. And if we don't believe, and if we let them, they would be very happy to overtake us and bring us into their way of life.
So they like this. They
like
the woke side or the cancel culture and all this stuff because it's speaking.
Yeah. And it would be Christmas for Islam and the CCP if the West went into civil war and we all started shooting each other. Because then they would come in and they could spread their religion and they could spread their the Communist Party of China.
Okay, let's pin this down. So toxic masculinity to this group is essentially just being masculine. It's not my definition that I explained earlier in the podcast. No. It's not. It's literally just because you're a man and you want to be the patriarch or a father figure or a husband figure, that is toxic masculinity.
Yes, because that upholds the system and contributes to the system, which is itself unjust and must be brought down.
Wow, that is fascinating.
Well, it goes beyond that. It even goes to like they're even against lot of what they call it positivism. They call empirical science positivism, and they're very much against that too. That data and statistics and surveys, they're very, very, very skeptical of anything that comes out of that. I had to fight tooth and nail in my dissertation to include both quantitative data analysis along with my critical theory critique of the system.
Well, you had to fight that because of.
Oh yeah, because a lot of the people on the theory side were like, you can't. No, like if you use science, you're upholding Western civilization, and you're promoting it. That's really bad. You shouldn't do it. And I'm like, well, I'm going to.
So this is mind blowing. So the 8% though, you're basically saying is the majority of the colleges and the I guess educational side.
Yeah. So this is in 2018. Inside Higher Education, I did a survey, and it's like 80% plus of faculty and 90% plus of administration identifies as far left. They don't are progressive or far left. And part of what you have too is guilt going on, right?
Right.
Because administrators have a really good living. They make a lot of money. It's a very cushy job. They're not in an oil field, they're not clearing mines, they're not, digging coal. And it's like, since it's like, well, I have this really cushy life and I've been told that I'm privileged and I need to, use that to good. I'll promote these virtues. And it's very easy to say, right? You just say and do the thing you're told to say and do, and you're told that it's helping. And it's like, and that's actually one of the critiques of this by Fraser's like, you're not actually helping. You're making yourself feel better. You feel guilty for being rich. You feel guilty for having this cushy job. And instead of, giving away your money, you're just saying words that they tell you to say.
Wow. So you would say the majority of this issue, or this, I call it an issue from a masculine standpoint, is coming from the education system. At mostly, would you say so? I was gonna say mostly the college level, but now there's teachers like in elementary school teaching things that these elementary school kids shouldn't even learn.
Right. So Marx was very much about disrupting the family, and that's been something they want to do ever since. And yeah, the idea is that, right, this is not new. People since time immemorial have known if you can get the kids, you can have them for the rest of their lives. Like the communists in the USSR and Maoist China knew that you get the kids, and once the kids are true believers, that's your future. That's your way in. Wow.
And who's behind most of this? As far as, is there a person? Is there an author, a professor, or somebody who's behind a lot of this to initiate these moves into the education system, like the younger generations of?
You're talking like hundreds or thousands of people are involved in this. Some of the big names are Herbert Marcuse, like he's big.
And you said he's still alive?
No, Herbert Marcuse I think has passed away.
Okay.
Jürgen Habermas, who I think has the way out of this problem, he's still alive.
Okay.
And he's getting close to 100 though.
Okay.
Yeah, like because he said, well, no, like, all right, well, let's take these left-wing critiques seriously and build a more just world, but like, let's not bring down the entire house of cards to do it, right? Like, let's realize that, yeah, you need a balance. You are a member of a community, but you're also an individual person. You have rights and responsibilities, but you also have freedom there too. And you need to take all this seriously to improve civilization. So he's very much a reformer who I'm really a big fan of.
Okay.
Almost impossible to read. It's a very thick, dense academic German, and it doesn't translate super well.
Now, you also mentioned just in passing conversation together that you like Jordan Peterson, who I'm also a big fan of. What resonates with you and what he has to say?
So I had spent 7 years in doing the good liberal thing, right? I went to the inner city. I taught people who were majority non-white. They were majority immigrant, 130 countries. I'm like, I'm doing the thing, right? I took my white privilege and I went and made $20,000 a year to teach people to make their lives better. And I came up to the PhD program. I was like, oh, you are not helping those people. You were colonizing their minds with whiteness. And you need to check your privilege. And you need to not argue with us. And you need to say what we tell you to say. Wow. And I said, and so what I found was if I brought up Jordan Peterson, it drove them crazy. And so every time someone told me to check my privilege, I'm like, check my privilege. I'll talk about Jordan Peterson until you hate me even more. And so it kind of just became a great way just to make them as miserable as they were making me.
So basically, you were that kid crapping in his pants in the classroom in front of the teacher.
Become ungovernable is the phrase. But I think he was onto something. Like, because Peterson got famous because he said, "No, you can't take away free speech. I don't care what harm it causes. I know that it's not nice to misgender trans people, but I'm not willing to lose free speech and free thought over this. Like, absolutely not." And he was the first one who got ran over by the train, right before I got ran over a year later. And I didn't know about him until that. I'm like, this train needs more people standing in front of it trying to derail it. Because if you lose free speech, you lose free thought, you lose your individuality, you lose your civilization. And there's not a plan for how this new future glorious civilization will work.
Right.
Just that it magically will somehow.
Yeah, it's just completely theory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I admire him that he stood on the train tracks because I stood on the train tracks too. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, and he seems to be quite the proponent of masculinity and what men bring to our society. And, it's funny. I talk to my men about this in our group, in our coaching calls and stuff. And I don't sit there and say, all right, how do we take down feminism? How do we protest against them and do this, that, and the other, or all these other groups that are out there? It's like, how do we stay in our lane and just go forward in life doing what we know what we're supposed to be doing, and not sit there and try to think that these other groups, it's our job to do anything about it. To me, it's like, I'd rather represent what masculinity should look like, leave an impressionable experience for them where they're like, wow, that was actually a good experience. Like, that was something positive. It's hard to ignore that. That's kind of my approach as a man anyway. Okay.
So there are 3 people who I'm going to recommend, and they're all feminists. And they're all they're very educated people. So Christina Hoff Sommers, who wrote Who Stole Feminism and the War Against Boys, Camille Paglia, and Deborah So.
Okay.
They're all public intellectuals. They're all huge names. And they're basically saying, no, what feminism was supposed to be and what we believe in is I should never be told I'm not allowed to do something because I'm a girl. I should not be told I'm not allowed to become a cop. I'm not allowed to become an astronaut. I'm not allowed to do this. Unless there's like some majorly compelling reason, like combat, like working in a men's prison, like really violent, like sexual offenders.
Sure.
Like, unless it's something like that, where it's really, really detrimental to be a woman, I should never be told I'm not allowed to do it because I'm a woman.
Right. Basically an outlier. If it's an outlier, that's completely different. But yeah. See, and I don't have a problem. See, that's the thing. And I talk about this when I talk about masculinity. Masculinity are characteristics that we can take on as men. And women can take them on too. And, if there's a female out there who's a CEO or owns her own company or whatever, even moms, I watch my wife with 3 kids and she starts to take over. She's using masculine traits, at least what I consider masculine traits. And it doesn't make her masculine. It doesn't make her more manly. It just, it's a characteristic that she needs to use in those situations. And they're rightfully so. What I teach though, is that when it comes down to a relationship and building attraction, if she's trying to put on her masculine role within the relationship between her and I'm putting on a masculine role, we're going to butt heads and there's not going to be a lot of magnetism created between us. Whereas if she uses that masculinity in the workplace in different areas of her life, totally great. I have no problem with that. And then when we're together, if I put on my masculine role and she puts on her feminine, well, now there's like a relationship bliss that takes place. There's magnetism and polarization where we're deeply attracted to one another. I'm not attracted to her sexually when she's putting on her masculine role. I'm not like, ooh, that's super sexy, because right, that's just not the attraction that most men will have. It's the feminine side. It's that soft, passive, flowing feminism, feminist energy, or feminine energy, excuse me, where the attraction starts to build, right? And that's for most. I'm not saying this is for everyone, but that would be the case for most heterosexual relationships. And even gay. Look, if you look at gay relationships, you'll see somebody's taking on the masculine role and somebody's taking on the feminine role most of the time. If not, the relationship probably fizzles out pretty quickly. Does that kind of make sense?
We can also put it in like alpha and beta terms, right? If you take two alpha personalities and put them in a room, they're going to fight the whole time. If you take two beta personalities and put them in a room, they're going to not go anywhere in life, and they're going to just like sit there and quietly deteriorate in front of each other.
Sure.
So most relationships work between a very dominant person and a submissive person, and whose like energies balance out as best as possible. And that can be any gender and any kind of sexual orientation.
And we've all heard this, right? It's like a dance, right? There's an ebb and flow to things, but somebody's got to lead the dance. And if you've got two people trying to lead that dance, it's going to look terrible. It's going to be a horrible dance between the two of you. But if one's leading and the other one's, being passive and just going with that, it's a beautiful thing, right? It looks amazing. Yeah. So kind of similar, I would say concept, but yeah, I mean, the idea that my wife can't lead in certain situations, or that I can't, be submissive to her, maybe her idea or her suggestion or things like that. It's just funny because you do have this group, even like a subreddit group. I believe it's the red pill, right? It's this group of men who believe that like you must be alpha all the time and you can never let anybody tell you anything otherwise, blah, blah, blah. And it's this domination, or this, I think, toxic for the most part, masculine stance where it's like, holy cow, you're coming off terribly and you're not being a true man, which, look, I'm going to come down to my kids' level. I'm going to get down on my knees and give them hugs when I see them so that they can see me eye to eye. And I'm going to, open the door for my wife. I'm going to do all these things, and they might be considered submissive in some ways, but they don't, I guess, threaten my masculinity in any way,
So I didn't think I had any part of me that was like, that enjoyed being submissive, but I do ballroom dancing. I do salsa, bachata, blues, and a few other ones. I actually kind of like being the follower. Like I'm 99% plus like the leader. Yeah. But sometimes like my partner is like, can I lead? I'm like, okay. And it's kind of fun, like they could be twirled around and spun around and all that, and like someone else be in charge. Like, so you have to it's a very interesting state of mind. So you're just like, you're going where they send you, and it's very relaxing. So you're like, I'm not in charge of anything.
Sure.
That person over there is making all the decisions, and it makes you a better leader too, right?
Right.
Because like I noticed like hand motion's a big thing in ballroom dancing. Like sending the signals or non-verbally while you're dancing. So yeah. Well,
it's almost like you're saying, even just to experience what it's like for your partner to be in their shoes, and what is it like to be led, and it almost gives you more strength to be able to lead better because you know what they're experiencing and what it feels like, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it's important too, like how much decisiveness matters. Because if you're dancing with someone and you're not decisive, you send mixed messages, and then they don't know how to respond, and then everyone's frustrated, and you're stepping on each other's feet. And
that's a masculine trait.
Yeah,
decisiveness. Because I teach men all this all the time. Being decisive is something a woman who wants to be. Again, this is for a woman who wants to be feminine. But if you're decisive and you're masculine, she loves that, because she like my wife. She'll come to me all the time. Like, what do you think? What do we want to do for food? Or what do you think about this? What's your opinion on that? And when I'm decisive and I just tell her flat out what I think or feel, she's able to help herself make a decision through what my thoughts are. And she might disagree, and I don't care, but it helps, right? And she stays in that feminine mindset, which is great. I mean, that's kind of the point of these relationships that we get into is how can we show up, create a lot of magnetism, create a lot of traction, and then kind of essentially live your best life because you're showing up when you need to. But you're right. I mean, there's times where I don't need to be masculine or take on those characters. I can be passive or relaxed or, in this flow state. And you can consider that a feminine energy. And there's times where I can do that and nothing negative happens. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It doesn't make me a woman. It doesn't make me it doesn't take me outside of my heterosexual relationship. But if that's all I bring to the table, though, my wife's not going to find me attractive, right? Because
you're gonna be a brute.
yes, yeah. But yeah, and so yeah, that's kind of the mindset and the philosophy or the theory behind masculine traits that create this positive effect in the world that we live in, where apparently those are completely all wrong to the woke.
Well, it's interesting. So I've studied the red pill world. They used to be the red pill on Reddit. They're now TRP.red. They went off into a smaller corner.
TRP, the red pill.
Turner King's no longer updates. So I was studying that.
Uh-huh.
And so basically what happens is you have a lot of males who failed as men, right? Yeah. Their wives left them. They let themselves get terribly out of shape. They have no muscle. They're not respected. They didn't achieve professionally. Like they were told it's okay to not be a man, and they believed it. And then all of a sudden, right, they're alone. There's no sex. There's no wife. There's no career. There's no mission. There's no values. And the red pill's like, here, I'm going to take the syringe of like masculinity. I'm going to stick it in you, and you're going to suddenly feel great, and you're just going to become like this machine again, and you're going to feel alive. And you're going to realize like that you're going to, and it fuels resentment and everything else.
Yes. Okay. Do I think there's some small truth to some of the things that they teach? Yeah, there's some good points.
Sure, like dress well, exercise, be confident. Yeah,
right.
Maintain frame in their world.
But then they take this stance toward women. I don't know if it's objectifying them, but it's definitely
it's totally objectifying them.
And then it's this negative, like, I'm here to use you, right? Yeah. Not be your partner, not be a real man, which that's not how that works, right? But it's so negative to read some of these guys in the forums, and the advice they're giving other men who are new to this kind of world or this viewpoint of masculinity. It really is toxic. I would consider that toxic masculinity.
No, they're going straight from like no masculinity to like hyper masculinity.
Yes.
They're shooting right over the middle, virtuous middle.
Right. They're not listening to Aristotle. I'm going to bug you after this show to get some more information. I want to read through that stuff because that's fascinating. And I really thought I was onto something. Apparently I was just, everything is under the sun. I'm just copying something already out there, but it's still a great diagram to kind of help understand. I think it helps men understand, look, where am I navigating my life? Where am I finding the middle, or am I push, because I have some men that come to my program and they're totally weak masculine men. They're not showing up. They're letting life pass them by. They're not working out, eating healthy. They're not doing the things that kind of drive, I guess, kind of an inner resiliency and strength to live life on what I call a higher level, right? I tell my men, like, look, let's turn the thermostat all the way up. Let's live life with the thermostat all the way up. And then when people around us have lower thermostats, most likely theirs will go higher because they're around us and we're influencing each other. If you keep your thermostat low and you're hanging out with somebody with a low thermostat, nothing happens and there's nothing pushed forward to live, I guess, a higher level of life or a better life. I mean, it's men, I think, especially men listening, if you're there, find somebody, a coach, a community, a program like the Muscular Gentleman to level up, because life will go super fast and you're going to look back and be like, man, I missed out on so much. But, not working out, not eating healthy, not doing all these things, you lose so much energy, and you wake up with this foggy brained, like, just hamster wheel of a life. It's like Groundhog's Day, and you're just trying to survive versus thrive, right?
Yeah.
Which is slow.
Staying biologically alive and living. Not everyone is living.
Right. You're just functioning as this human with not much to contribute, But
so it's actually been interesting. So in my masculine journey, so young me, I was going to live fast and die young, and I just made all the bad decisions there were to make. I didn't plan on living past 25. Sure. And I was like really, really out of shape. I couldn't do push-ups. I couldn't jog more than a block. And I've been undertaking like all these physical challenges ever since. And then I was very much on the left. Like I was going to be the state representative for Arvada, in the Democratic Party. And then I spent the last 5 years studying the right, because I saw like all these people just like denigrating the right and always attacking the right because I'm in academia. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go over there and say hi. I'm going to meet some of these people and hang out with them. So I met like a lot of friends and family members who were more conservative. I'm like, tell me what the world looks like to you. I'm like, yeah, well, you need to develop your masculinity. You need to do this. And like, I learned working out, getting in shape, building muscle. I learned firearms and medical technology, radio technology. I'm learning how. I have a friend right now who's teaching me how to. We've taken apart my motorcycle and putting it back together.
Wow.
I'm like, oh my god, I can do motorcycle repair now.
That's
and like
awesome.
I'm becoming a more useful man like all the time. And it's
right. You can contribute
what it does to your confidence. Yeah.
On multiple levels. It's not just it's so funny. I have a friend that's he's like, man, how are you able to do all this stuff around your house? Because I've redid my fireplace, and I did the flooring, and I've done all sorts of different like little remodel projects. And it's like, I just jump in and, between YouTube and friends, I just do it. I just figure it out, and I cuss my way through it. I'm sure I get super frustrated with a lot of things, but I figure it out because I want to be able to contribute in multiple areas of my life, not just my job. Right. There's people out there that might be listening, and it's like, if you're just good at your job and then you're good at seeking pleasure outside of that, that's the 9 to 5 working to collect as many toys as you can, and then you die. That's not contributing to society, and it's not living your best life. It's a false, I think, reality that I think. What's that?
That was the plot of Fight Club.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
But and it's funny because I talk about the distinctions in the program between seeking pleasure and seeking purpose. And, I really think what you've been doing throughout your life, maybe not your little, what was it, punk rock years or whatever.
Yeah.
But
young me was kind of nasty.
But you went into seeking purpose, teaching these kids and, standing up for what you believe within the education system. All of that is a purpose. Like, you're living out a purpose. And I think that's how you live your best life. It's not how much pleasure and toys and things can I collect, and that's what I think a lot of people get the understanding of, or they watch their parents do that and they either get depressed or they just follow in the footsteps.
Yeah. No. So I'll give you a couple examples. So the first time I almost died on the motorcycle is when I converted to Christianity, because I did some very serious praying so I didn't get ran over and creamed at 180 miles an hour because I was going to oncoming traffic.
And so you were like, why did I just pray? Like, that was pure, just like millisecond instinct to just go there and pray. Yep.
I was a 4-lane highway, 2 up, 2 down. And I was passing Winnebago, and it became a 2-lane highway. So it was mountain, Winnebago, my partner behind me. I just shoot up to 105 miles an hour around a blind curve and then do a zigzag. And I came within like 6 inches of the Winnebago and the guardrail at 105. And that was like, dear God, how I don't always make the best decisions. Well, it's funny I should bring that up because I would really appreciate not having incoming traffic right now. What? I had made a really dumb decision, and I could really use being saved. The second time I almost died on the motorcycle, I got in an accident in January where I broke my collarbone and got knocked out. But before I lost consciousness, I hit a bunch of gravel, and the bike's sliding. I'm in a sea of sparks. I'm just like this like comet of like sparks. Bon Jovi's playing in my headset, and it's this beautiful winter day. I'm like, this is not a bad way to die. Like, I was totally okay with dying in that moment. And so a lot of the Eastern religions, it's about how do you feel at the end of your life? Are you angry? Are you regretful? Are you resentful? And that's what determines your rebirth. And I'm like, I was totally okay with like that having been my life. And it's because I've lived a life of purpose. Like, I'm okay with it. Not, like I can live another 50 years. I can be gone today. Like, and purpose gives you that ability to not be afraid of death.
Oh yeah. I like that. That's a great quote. Living out your purpose. Let's say that again. Living out your purpose allows you to.
Oh, that's pretty good. I'll have to go back to that. That wasn't a spur moment.
I'm going to have to go back.
Living a life of purpose means you don't have to be afraid of death.
Yes, that's so good. Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
And you can almost say the same could be when, because before you were saying like, I'm going to die early, so I'm just going to like, and that was with no purpose, right?
Yeah.
But you had this expectation of dying,
which
might be a little bit different than being at peace with dying.
Right. No, that was totally different. It was. So I got really close to suicide when I was 17. I'd gotten rid of all my friends. I'd gotten rid of all my possessions. I was practicing carving up my arms. And I got to the point where I was going to do it. I'd set the date. I'd done the ritual. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't in any pain whatsoever. I had never known what it was like to not be in pain. And I was like, this is really weird. That's also why I believe as a Christian.
Why did you feel like you weren't in pain? What brought that on?
I didn't realize this until I became a philosopher later on. It's sort of this existential moment. I'm like, I'm choosing to be alive. I'm not forced to be alive. No one's making me wake up and no one's making me do anything. I can always come into this shower with this knife and I can always end myself. And if I don't do that, I'm choosing to accept life on its terms, including the pain and the suffering.
Wow.
So it's stoicism, but I didn't know it was called stoicism at the time because I was, a kid.
Cool. Now that's like Marcus Aurelius, right? Like he has a book on the stoicism, and it's such a good book.
It's fantastic. I make students read that all the time. The
meditation one
online. Yeah.
The daily one. That's such a good. I have it on my nightstand, and I pick it up several times a week, and I just it gets my mind going. And man, it's one way to kind of stimulate the brain. I'll put it in the description of our podcast, but for those listening, Marcus Aurelius has it's like the daily Stoic. I'm going to blank on the name of the book.
Meditations.
Yeah, Meditations. Such a good book.
25 centuries out of copyright, so it's totally free and online.
Yeah. Okay. So we can get it online. I'll find the website for that. But if you want the book too, just something to read before you go to bed, I don't suggest reading before you go to bed. It might get your mind going. When you wake up, look, they're like little paragraphs. They're nothing crazy. It's not like you have to read 4 or 5 pages. It's like 1 page, basically.
Yeah.
Maybe 2. And you can just, think about and ponder and kind of meditate on it for the rest of the day. But really good read. Yeah, absolutely. So basically where you were at was you created the mindset of stoicism, which was, I'm going to go through life, whether it's hard or easy, but what on your terms, kind of in the sense, or what do you, how would you define that?
What shifted in that moment was the world stopped being solid and the world started being much more fragile. And I'm like, oh, I can do what I want to do. I can make my own path. I'm not stuck inside these structures. And then philosophy really helped me break that all down. I'm like, oh, wow, like these mental structures are structures. Like I'm not inside this like concrete prison.
Right.
I'm actually free to do whatever the hell I damn want to. I just have to accept the consequences of my choices.
Sure. And I love that, man, because it seems like you've done that within your teaching and teaching philosophy or even political science, where you're like, it's like some of these professors and just people everywhere, we take these firm stances. And this is what drives me nuts with politics, is we take these firm stances and you immediately give yourself the inability to look at the other options and the other side, as if like, if you do look at it or read about it or try to understand it, you're going to lose control or something, right? It's like a Christian not being able to look into Buddhism and all these other religions and just see the good inside of it. It's like, no, it immediately has to be negative, damned, and it's from the devil. And it's like, you're truly being that kind of one-dimensional when you can't just see the positive in so many different aspects of life, politics included. But yeah, I mean, I find that interesting.
So when I taught philosophy for 7 years, I also taught comparative religion and Eastern religion. So, and I used to do a lot of field trips. I love field trips. We'd go to like the Hindu temple. We'd go to the Buddhist temple. We'd go to the synagogue. We went to the mosque. That was an experience, taking a bunch of like white Christian kids to a mosque. The imam was very, very nice. He was very patient with us and our questions, which probably came off as like, a little naive and innocent.
Naive, yeah, I was gonna say naive.
Yeah. It's like he insisted we all had to go in business casual too, and the women had to cover their hair. So it was like stepping into a foreign culture.
Sure.
But he was very nice. All my guests were always really nice, and we had Unitarians, we had Greek Orthodox, and so it's like, even if you don't believe, you should at least be able to like discuss things with them. So that, like, no one chooses their religion or their politics to be a bad person.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because people today, it's like, if you don't agree with me, I hate you. If you don't agree with me, I have to somehow blast you and whatever. It's just this immediate negativity toward somebody not agreeing with you instead of just appreciating where they're coming from. I wouldn't consider myself a religious person, but man, do I have so much respect for people that live out their life in a whatever that is with conviction. I have no judgment at all. It's like, that's so impressive to live a life with that kind of conviction and I guess integrity for what they believe.
Yeah. So part of the we'll go into that. There's a really good movie called The Sunset Limited. It features Samuel L. Jackson as a street preacher who was a former convict for murder,
Uh-huh.
and Tommy Lee Jones as a suicidal philosophy professor. And they discuss like whether or not life is worth it, and whether or not you should believe in God. And it's written by Cormac McCarthy, who wrote All the Pretty Horses and On the Road. It's a fantastic movie, just like for like two people just discussing religion and life and like whether or not it's worth it to keep going.
Interesting. Say
And
the
so,
title again.
The Sunset Limited.
Okay.
It's the name of the train that's going to run over Tommy Lee Jones when he tries to commit suicide at the beginning of the movie.
Okay.
It all takes place inside a single apartment. It's just two people talking.
Wow. Okay. So you've got to have some a long attention span for this one.
Oh, it's so good. Like the dialogue is just amazing.
Okay.
And so kind of what it comes down to is, and this is sort of like what I've seen, I won't spend too much on this because I know it's not a religious show, but it's like, so if sin is separation from God, Christ represents the possibility of reunification with the divine. That if you could live perfectly at all times and all places and have a perfectly clear mind, you would be experiencing God constantly. And Christ represents that possibility. And what separates you from that is, your sinful nature, that you're distracted by things, that you do the wrong thing. And that's not even Christianity. That's also in all the Eastern religions.
Sure.
Right? That when you take on, this is Sikhism is what I'm thinking of, like your soul is a mirror of God's love and expression, but it's dirtied by the sin and the bad choices that you make. And you're always tempted to make the bad choice. And so it's like, what if I never made the bad choice? What if I never drank alcohol again? What if I never missed a workout? What if I was never unkind ever again? And so it represents the possibility of living like that, even though you're not going to do it, as a person.
Sure.
Or a bodhisattva in Buddhism.
That's really fascinating. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out for sure. So, okay. I know that you are, you have, I believe, and I'm going to put this in your description in the podcast, but you have did you call it a stack? What did you call it?
Substack. Yeah.
So,
Nathanial Bork 2 .substack.com. And I'm the only person in the world whose name is Nathanial. It's supposed to be EL. My adoptive mother thought the Bible spelled my name wrong, so she took it upon herself to correct it on my birth certificate.
So yours is AL.
I'm the only AL in the universe, I think.
Okay. So I'll make sure I put that in the description, and that's somewhere where they can find you. For listeners that might have questions or want to reach out to you. Awesome.
Thank you.
And you left some pretty good stuff here. So this was such a great episode, Nate. I really appreciate it. I'm definitely going to have you back. There's so many things we could talk about, but you mentioned some feminism books for people to check out because it seems to be more in line with what the original intent of feminism was for, which was not this insanely negative context toward everyone and we hate everyone unless you're with us, right? What do you mind at least that first book that you mentioned?
Who Stole Feminism by Christina Hoff Sommers.
Okay. Who Stole Feminism? The book or the movie that you mentioned was Sunset.
The Sunset Limited.
Sunset Limited. And then what else did you dropped several things. Obviously I need to start reading Aristotle and checking stuff out. Is there a
great way to get to sleep?
Was it?
It's a great way to get to sleep. He didn't actually write it. They were notes from the classes that he taught. So it reads like you're reading someone's notes. It's dry as hell. It'll put you straight to bed. Yeah.
What is
a link to the virtues? There's a really good summary of it all.
A link to virtues?
Yeah, a link to the Aristotelian virtues.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's something I can just do on my phone.
Yeah.
Cool. And then was there anything else that you dropped as far as just for people that like some homework, right? Some like tangibles.
If anybody wants to get a hold of me, like I can go through the whole history of like theory and where it came from and who the big names are.
That's wild.
And like why people are saying what they're saying and who thought of it and what's going on.
Right.
So yeah, like I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's so fast. This was such a fascinating episode, Nate. I really appreciate it. Okay. So lots of things to think about, but truly what we're, and as the Muscular Gentleman, what we're saying though is, the woke, this 8%, this group that basically says masculinity that we call is toxic. Just being a man, being masculine is toxic. And what I'm saying to that, and I think Nate would agree, is essentially you've got to do the things that are going to help you live your best life, contribute to society, regardless of what people are saying. But that includes working out, eating healthy, living a life where you have a body and a structure to live out of with the most energy and to be able to do the most to contribute, whether it's to your family, yourself, society, whatever that looks like. That's kind of the point, right? That's why we're here. How can we influence those around us and help other people have a better life? There's some purpose right there. You, Nate, you live out a purpose. You're trying to improve the life of those around you and people you don't even know. And that's kind of why we're here, right?
Yeah. We're here to support each other and take care of each other and have a little bit of fun along the way.
Yes. And that's too, look, I'm not saying when I talk about seeking out purpose versus pleasure, it doesn't mean I don't stop and smell the roses. It's just, what's the ratio, right? If it's all pleasure and then like no purpose or very little, it's probably you're out of balance, right?
Yeah. No, right, there's helping people and there's working hard.
Yes.
And then you got to have fun too. Like I would love to know what it's like to be like Ron Gronkowski, the former Patriot, now the Buccaneer. I'm like, I want to know what it's or like Andrew WK. Like, I want to know what it is to be like that excited, like a golden retriever, just happy to be in the moment and just like joyful all the time. Like, I'm like, what have those guys figured out that like I haven't figured out yet? But they're just always happy and excited.
Right. That's
I'm not capable of staying in the moment like that.
Yeah, staying in the present's a huge one, definitely. I went into an episode with Nate Ewert, who's a breathwork specialist, and it was all about getting present, which is so huge too. I think for most of us, we struggle with that in today's society. But awesome. Okay, I always ask all my guests, what would you call what would you define the muscular gentleman just off the name? What does that look like to you if you were to just throw it out there?
Controlled strength. Right. So we talked earlier about like the incels and the red pill community and all that. Those are weak men trying to be aggressive to overcome for that. That's dangerous. A muscular gentleman is someone who has all the strength and power to defend himself, to defend the community, to build a world. But he uses that energy towards a positive, constructive end.
I love it. That's fantastic. Yeah. You're on point. You're spot on. Well, thank you so much, Nate, for being here. I'll make sure we get some of that stuff into the description. And until next time, I'll definitely be hollering at you for a round 2.
Definitely. Look forward to it.
Awesome.
You've been listening to The Muscular Gentleman. Finally, a podcast that's unapologetic for being a man. Thanks for joining us this week. Make sure you visit the website, www.themusculargentleman.com. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you like the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or just tell a buddy about the show. That would help too. Don't forget, Rustin is available for private coaching. Embrace your masculinity and live the life you've always wanted. See you next time on The Muscular Gentleman.